And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall examine the implementation of proceeds of crime law.
In a fast-changing world, some issues just never seem to go away. And one of them is corruption. It cuts across from high-profile figures to everyday individuals. And it keeps evolving new forms.
Absolutely, Victor. It's a big elephant in the room that refuses to go away. And here in Nigeria, some public officials and political leaders have recently found themselves in the spotlight, facing investigations by anti-graft agencies over alleged financial misconduct.
True. And while some of them are currently in detention, some others are battling asset forfeiture cases. One case making headlines is that of the former Central Bank of Nigeria governor, Godwin Emefiele. The House of Representatives has even suggested that his Abuja estate be converted into housing for low and middle income earners, including internally displaced persons. How about that?
I hope that will be realized anyway. And you know, the legal fireworks continues. Sadly, this case and others are not new. From the Abuja loot to more recent investigations, Nigeria have seen it so many times happening.
Indeed. And in fact, records show that between 1999 and 2023, just more recently, about $4 billion in cash and $3 billion in assets have been recovered from the Abuja loot alone.
And now it brings us to a crucial question. What exactly is the legal framework for confiscating the proceeds of crime in Nigeria?
Good question. And that takes us straight to the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act of 2022. It is a law that has been designed to coordinate how proceeds of crime are identified, recovered, and managed.
And interestingly, this law dates back to an earlier bill introduced in the 7th National Assembly. It stalled for years, but finally became law under the 9th Assembly in 2002, after a long, rigorous journey through the legislative process.
Now, Section 3 of the Act gives relevant organizations like the EFCC and ICPC the power to enforce and administer its provisions. It also mandates them to establish proceeds of crime, of course, management, Directorate for Proper Asset Management. So this morning, we are digging deeper into how this law is being implemented, what's working, what's not, and how effective it has been in ensuring accountability and transparency. I am Victor, as a welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Thanks for joining us. Our guest will be with us shortly on this Thursday edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the NTA, and newspaper review will come up in a moment. But first, let's take the news with... You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we'll be discussing the Proceeds of Crime Act 2022. And to push this conversation, our guests are already around, and then let's take this background report by Oyeyemi Ajay.
The implementation of the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act 2022 in Nigeria is central to establishing a framework for seizing, confiscating and managing assets derived from unlawful activities, including through a non-convicted-based process. The term proceeds of crime refers to assets, money and properties acquired by criminals as a result of their criminal activities. Proceeds, on the other hand, reflects property, whether wholly or partly derived or realized directly or indirectly from an unlawful activity situated within or outside Nigeria. The Proceeds of Crime law covers the management of stolen public funds stashed in foreign banks. Even though the passage of the new law is a welcome development, there are several issues that arise from the provisions of the Act. One major reason is for the corrupt officers not to enjoy the proceeds of their corrupt acts. For implementation, the use of powers to monitor financial accounts, access computer systems, and obtain records to identify and locate illicit proceeds tops the chart. The existing structure involves multiple agencies, including the EFCC, ICPC, and Nigerian Customs Service, which has led to concerns about poor coordination and efficiency. Now, with the full effect of the law, how important is this towards eradicating corruption in the country? What are the assets recovery processes, and how far have agencies gone in building a formidable framework for implementation? Our guests already seated in the studio will be discussing these and more shortly.
Many thanks, Yemi Ajayi. Indeed, we are set to begin the conversation, and to get right into it, let me introduce Olakunle Akinshola, who is a lawyer and is of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC. We thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
And also joining us from our Benin studio, we have Reverend David Ogolo. He is the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, and member of the Interim Executive Council of the Non-State Actors of African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption. He's joining us from Benin, our Benin studio. Good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conversation.
Begin with you. Can you walk us, through the central aim of the Nigeria Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act 2022, and what is the vision behind it?
Thank you very much. The Proceeds of Crime Act was established 2022 after much struggle, and as since it became an act which provided legal and framework for asset seizure, confiscation, and management in Nigeria. It has been the legal framework that provided the background for the anti-corruption agency like EFCC, ICPC, and others. Relevant organizations mentioned in the Act are almost about 18, which include EFCC I mentioned earlier on, ICPC, NDLA, NAPTIP, and others. I think the reason why this law became relevant, internationally, we have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. In this global framework of anti-corruption, the Chapter 5 of it deals with the issue of asset recovery. And then in most countries trying to domesticate this convention, which Nigeria is also a member, this law fulfills that gap. And it has provided the legal team for EFCC and other anti-corruption agencies to carry out their anti-corruption work in Nigeria. And you will quite agree with me that EFCC and ICP, to a large extent, have fulfilled this big vision of tackling corruptions, crime in the country. And if you also see, the major goal of the Proceeds of Crime is about asset seizure. And we have a local seizure of assets. We also have the ones that are also involved internationally. And the one most popular that Nigerians are familiar with is the Abuja loot. But beyond Abuja loot, we have also seen the Desiani loot. We have seen the Alamisia loot. We have seen quite a number of assets seized from foreign jurisdiction. And this money recovered has helped to address some sustainable development projects in Nigeria and legacy projects in Nigeria, and some have also been used for supporting poor people across the country, particularly the Abuja 2, which was used for cash transfer, for providing resources for very poor of the poorest of the country. So you can see obviously the benefit of fighting corruption. And we must give the thanks to EFCC and ICPC and other anti-corruption agencies that have helped to use this legal framework to carry out their action. And that, again, have also helped to also complement the global effort to tackling money laundering and terrorist financing and other crime, organized crime linked to issue of development challenge, particularly in poor country Nigeria. And why is this poker very important in Nigeria today is because you can see that there's illicit financial flow. The IFF challenge, and Nigeria is one typical country mentioned in the Mbeki high-level panel report on illicit financial flow from Africa. And Nigeria is typical in the sense that the level of illicit financial flow out of the country has really undermined development in the country. And that's why we are happy that the federal government and through the Federal Land Revenue Services recently organized a high-level conference on illicit financial flow that puts the whole conversations around illicit financial flow on the national agenda, and the role of anti-corruption agencies like EFCC and ICPC is very important in this fight against illicit financial flow. And the legal framework within they carry out this action that provides that power is poker. And poker has all the provisions that provides this enablement. But what is unique about poker, you know, is the non-conviction-based approach and provisions that is contained in the poker law that provides the power for EFCC and ICPC and other anti-corruption agency in the poker law to carry out their seizure of assets without necessarily going through criminal approach. And that's a very innovative provision that has empowered this anti-corruption agency to carry out their action. If you look the success recorded by EFCC in tackling huge crime in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs in the previous administration, you will agree with me that this law came handy. And if you also see number of seizure that EFCC and ICP have carried out in the country, particularly with public sector corruption, you will also agree that Proceed of Crime Act has also helped to empower these institutions. So the need for public awareness, the need to also continue to strengthen the implementation of this law is very important. And against the background of the review carried out about UNCAC, which is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption implementation in Nigeria, some key recommendations that have come out of it has also informed the need to begin to see how poker can also be strengthened to give the teeth to anti-corruption agency to continue to carry out their work in the country.
Right. Thank you very much, Reverend David Ugolo, for your opening remarks. We will get back to you in the course of the conversation. Now, let's get back here in the studio and to Olakunle Akinshola, who is a lawyer and Assistant Director at the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Department of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC. Again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Now, the Proceeds of Crime Act is meant to streamline asset recovery and management. From the ICPC, perspective, how has this law changed how anti-corruption agencies operate?
All right. Before the passage of POCA, the law and practice governing the administration and the management of forfeited assets varies depending on the crime that has been committed and the law that has been used. For example, you have in Section 37 of the ICPC Act the power of the chairman to seize assets that may be used as evidence in court. So you see that principally the forfeiture regime centered around the criminal confiscation of assets. So when the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act was passed in 2022, it added to the powers, it strengthens the power of the law enforcement agency, particularly by introducing the non-conviction-based asset recovery regime that Reverend Ogolo just made mention of. So that the POCA itself, as we call it now, has helped to engender the powers of the law enforcement, rather than to limit their action to assets that may be used for as the evidence in court, or that may be instrumentalities of the crime, even unclaimed assets now can therefore be taken by law enforcement agencies and taken to court to show the court that, look, we have tried to investigate around these assets, and there's no way we found there's nobody that we feel has come forward to say is the owner. So the non-conviction based asset regime made provisions that assets that are unclaimed assets that are intended to be used as a commission, for the commission of an offense, that are even instrumentalities of a crime, and this is provided for in Section 9 of the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act, Section 9(3). Yes.
Now, one of the criticisms before now was that recovered assets were poorly tracked or even mismanaged. Has the Act truly closed that gap in this regard?
Well, first, the poker itself is a civil law. While it addresses the proceeds of criminal or unlawful activities, it uses the civil procedural regime as we have it in the country to because it's an adjectival law. It's procedural. It's not a substantive law or the one that creates an offense or rights and obligations.
Okay.
Yeah. So what that has done in itself is that it helps or aided the powers of law enforcement to take assets that they are found to be liable to forfeiture before the court, and then let the court decide one way or the other how or whether or not this asset should be forfeited finally to the federal government. Now, in Nigeria, the default beneficiary of a forfeiture order is the federal government of Nigeria. And by the budgetary approval processes, monies are paid, and it's also provided for in the poker that all monies recovered should be paid into the confiscated and forfeited properties account. That's each agency should also have it, is with the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria. The approving authority of this money or from this account is the President and the National Assembly. The President with the advice of the National Assembly. So nobody can go there. Though it is for the law enforcement to transmit or transfer monies are recovered into the account, it is only the President and the National Assembly that has the mandate to spend out of it. And the provisions is clear on what to spend this money on.
Okay, the provisions are very clear. And we have also joining us in the studio this morning, Abubakar Ahmed Tanimu. He's a human rights lawyer and a former banker. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. You've been listening to the other guests, talk. We're beginning to understand, the act itself. So, in your opinion, and as a lawyer and a human rights activist, how does this act differ from previous, asset recovery efforts led by agencies like the EFCC or ICPC? And why was it necessary, actually, to, create a unified framework for managing recovered assets in Nigeria? What is the necessity in that?
Thank you very much. The question is apt in line with what we have witnessed in the recent years. Before now, in our gamut of law, we have various laws scattered in the penal code, in the criminal, administration of criminal justice, various laws. And those laws is not synchronized, whereby the sole aim is about conviction. And the standard for conviction is usually very high, beyond reasonable doubt. So if you are in court, what you need to prove before the court for you to get conviction is that you have created a scenario whereby there is no iota of doubt in the minds of the judge and in the minds of reasonable people of the society. And because of that, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and most times is in the legal balance that is better you let go 99 criminal than to punish an innocent soul. So that regime has paved way for the deviants to have a loophole, and they've abused it significantly. So what this law seeks to achieve, what POCA 22 seeks to achieve, is to reduce the burden of proof that is required in these. This is no longer a criminal adjudication going on in court. It's a civil matter whereby the burden of for you to get conviction now is on the balance of probability. What a reasonable man in that circumstances will believe that these monies, these assets are proceeds of crime. If you work in NTA, your salary is maybe ₦1 million, and you have a property that worth 1 billion in Guzapi. What I need to do in court is to tell the court, for a start, let's have an interim order to, first of all, seize this property and bring it to the court. It's now left for you
to prove
how
that
you acquired it. How you acquired. Maybe it could be inheritance. So let's see where you got it from. It could be a gift. Let's see the source of that income. The law is very clear. All transactions are to be routed through financial institutions, and a lot of people don't do that. So the essence of this law now is to make the processes to be very simple, to be time bound. You cannot use stay of execution to delay the processes. It's so expeditiously done that once an allegation is made, already those security agencies, the EFCC, the ICPC, they have this in their laws. But because of the implementation, the ICPC, the EFCC, they have the right to question not only your source of poverty, but your source of wealth. But over time, in questioning that, it has been a big challenge because the burden of proof is so high. Poker has made it to be as simple, and we believe that, and we encourage the security agencies to now, they don't have any reason not to now investigate the so-called big men, the people you see around you. When I came into Abuja, there's a property that I've seen for close to 20 years. Nobody has been in that property in Wuse, and I keep asking, who owns this property? We want to see a regime whereby not only security agencies, now there should be close collaboration. We made a lot of gains and a lot of litigation with the Whistleblowing Act. At the point in time, it was celebrated, but the same lawmakers made law to now punish those the whistleblowers. So but now there's an avenue, there's an opportunity. The incentive should be there. People around, they know houses, they know places whereby you have structures lying fallow. People should give account. How comes you have enormous house and nobody is living in it? In other clime, if you see an abandoned property, so-called, you could go in, stay in, and that same poker law can now come to play, whereby you seek for a restraining order, you seek for an order to tell the other party, you give all the necessary notices, come and prove to the federal government that you own this property, and you own this property through lawful and legal means. The idea is that anything that you earn legally with your own sweat, you will not allow it to just go rot away.
Yes,
and
we
have instances of properties.
Estates.
People are languishing. The average property, to rent a property here in Ira 11 now, you are talking of 3.5 million for a 2-bedroom flat. And you have estates lying fallow for years. 5 years, 10 years. Nobody is staying in it. No investor, no anybody that's acquired legitimate income will build such kind of edifice and just leave it. You go to Utako, you see humongous building lying fallow. So the essence of this law is that our security agencies have been empowered beyond any doubt that you can now go after those assets. And the processes have been made very, very simple and easy. In fact, you go to the Federal High Court, you go to the High Court of State, what you just need to do is to have an order. It could be a motion expert where you don't need the other party to be present and say, this property A, we are suspecting it to be a property that has been acquired by proceeds of crime. Then you put a notice to the general public as instructed by the court. You can renew those notices for about 180 days, all to give the suspect or the defendant an opportunity to come forward and say, yes, these are my properties and I acquired it. So now, we've always clamored for the reversal of rule in our constitution and our various gamut of law. The procedures for fighting crime is acquisitorial, whereby you are accused and you are presumed to be innocent. So now we want to bring in the inquisitorial approach by this law, whereby the burden of proof now have been shifted to individuals. So now and persons that have been suspected. It's okay. We are not saying you have stolen, but come and prove to us that these properties that you have acquired were acquired through lawful and legitimate means. Unlike when we want to go through what the Constitution provides, where it's strict. For criminal matters, it has to be acquisitorial. You are presumed to be innocent until
Unless
beyond
proven
reasonable
guilty.
that you prove. So now there's a shift, a major shift. And before I forget, there's an important aspect that we must commend the drafters and the framers of this law, is that unlike before, when you go to central business area, you see expensive Hummers that have been lying fallow for 20 years, and they now became worthless over time because they've been abandoned. This regime of law has made it possible that such kind of asset can be disposed of immediately. I've always clamored for that. You seize a property, the person has refused to come, dispose of it
Let
at a
me
market
pause
value.
here. What's the loophole? Where are the loopholes here?
The loopholes before now, there was no enabling law. But now we now have enabling law. So security agencies can no longer give us the excuse that they are still waiting to evaluate. They want to get the owner.
No,
we
but
don't need that
why
anymore.
is the law not working as it should since 2022? What are the gaps that you see in
A
implementation?
lot of gaps. The law encouraged the various agencies to now have a specialized directorate, whereby you will be headed by a director. I believe that's what he is at the moment. And it's not enough for you to have laws. You must synthesize. A lot of education must go on, a lot of reorientation. Then you now have a lot of work to do in terms of implementation. We need more auctioneers. We need more. People are clamoring that there are no jobs. We need estate valuers to be on ground. You need asset managers to be on ground. You need to get them verified. You get them on board that, okay, this is the essence of our scheme. We want to value this asset. We want you to be able to manage. It's not only sell. You can equally put it into public use. You commercialize it, and the income generated will now be fixed in that. If it is a property, you rent it out at prevailing market prices. Maybe even you can even give reduction to civil servant, but you know that the asset is preserved. The income generated is taken into a federal government account. If tomorrow and the real owner now comes out and proves that he actually owns the property, then the FIRS and other tax body will take the necessary tax that is supposed to be taken, and then we will now know that properties that have been abandoned are accounted. It will not function until the drivers are decided to say, okay, we want to make this laws work. Law on its own will not work until the drivers, when I say drivers, even the courts, the implementers, the general public, they should create windows whereby individuals, a lot of us here, we all know where those abandoned properties are. There's an individual that keeps about 200 vehicles, a Hilux vehicle. You know that something is wrong. He's not a business, he's a government official in a ministry, and you see him keeping 200 Hilux buses. Ordinarily, the ICPC, the AFCC should be involved. But as a lawyer, I'm telling you for free, I've written series of petitions to the police, to the ICPC, and I have to be following up. We should discourage that. They should be the one on any account. You go online, you send a message. They just need a signal. Once the signal is there, you don't need anybody to come and defend on their own. They have the powers to even look at where things are going on wrong and initiate investigation based on intelligence. But we've witnessed abuses. You go have clients where the police, especially the Yahoo boys, they just pick them up, whether they are clean or they are not clean. Once you cannot give them the explanation, it's more of transactional. When I say transactional, is what will come in for some. For some, they need to look inwards.
All right. Thank you very much, Barrister Tanimu. Let me get back to our Benin studio where we have Reverend David Ugolo. Now, we have seen a lot of funds recovered abroad and repatriated to the country. Are you confident that these recovered funds are now being managed with under clear legal frameworks?
Yes, thank you very much. Again, that again brings me to the another very important element of the Proceeds of Crime Act, the victim element of the law. You will agree with me that there are quite a number of restitutions that has happened that has led to memoranda of understanding between Nigeria and foreign jurisdictions. And so several of these MOU led to the restitutions we now refer to Abuja 1, Abuja 2, Abuja 3, which has come from US, come from UK, and all these restitutions have helped to finance projects in Nigeria. One of them we monitored, which is the Abuja 2, which we refer to the mantra monitoring, which led civil society to monitor how over $325 million was used to finance cash transfer, with the agency, the National Cash Transfer Office, implementing the project, which led to quite a number, over 2 million Nigerians across the country benefited from the cash transfer program. And so that's the benefit of that restitution. That's victim of that crime committed by Abuja during this regime. Nigerian people benefited in that restitution. And just recently, again, we have also seen an MOU between the Nigeria and the U.S. government that led to the restitution of the Alamisia asset from the United States, which we are currently monitoring. And that money now, over $1 million in the Central Bank of Nigeria, is going to be used for public health facility in about 8 local governments in Bayelsa State. And I'm happy that the federal government, under the leadership of the Federal Ministry of Justice, with the directors in the Asset Recovery and Management Unit, are working closely with the Bayelsa government to see that the money is used judiciously. And what that reflects is that crime must not pay. The return of that money to Bayelsa demonstrates justice, and then it also demonstrates that victims are compensated. And if those eight public health centers across the 8 local governments in Bayelsa, they are able to now refurbish them and strengthen them, the Bayelsa people will benefit from that restitution. Great thanks to the U.S. government, great thanks to the Nigerian government for collaborating and providing an enabling environment for civil society. Currently, with the support of the UK government, which have supported our organization, we are working closely with Bangof, which is the coalition of NGOs in Bayelsa State, to monitor the process to ensure that once this money is returned to Bayelsa and the money is used judiciously. And that's what happened at the federal level when organizations like CLEAN also monitor the Abuja 3, which was used for 3 legacy projects across the country. The Abuja Kanu Road, the Lagos Ibadan Road, and the Niger Bridge. And all this money was used to finance those 3 major projects. And then the Desiani money through, this is an area where we are also very concerned. We're raising awareness about it, that, about $52.8 million was returned as some of the money stolen by Desiani was returned back to Nigeria, which it was agreed in the MOU that the World Bank and Nigerian government should use it for rural electrification project. We are also monitoring that project. We are also calling on the federal government that they should provide information for Nigerians, because it helps again to strengthen the voice of those who are campaigning for restitution. It helps also to strengthen the legitimacy of the work that EFCC, ICPC, and other anti-corruption agencies are doing, because it's not an easy step to get these resources returned back. As somebody who is familiar with this asset recovery for the last 30 years, I know how challenging even countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and other, Nepal, Sri Lanka, they don't find it easy to get their money back to their country. But Nigeria has been lucky that we now have Abuja 1, Abuja 2, Abuja 3, and we have Desiani asset being returned back to the country. And some of these resources are actually going to projects. And then you can see the legitimacy question also coming around it. When you talk to some Nigerians, they said they have looted the money. But somehow, true to be said, because of poor awareness. That's why I must again thank the NTA management for providing this opportunity for us to have conversations around the proceeds of crime and the issue of asset restitution. Because ultimately what we are talking about is domestic mobilization of resources. Nigeria need all the resources of this world to finance development. If Nigeria must meet the sustainable development goal, then we must have enough resources to be able to finance development. And because of the impact of illicit financial flow occasioned by the role that public sector corruption is having on the country. So to bridge that gap, and that's why I'm very happy that some of our discussants there have also make references to the innovation that you have seen in Proceeds of Crime Act, which explains the link between using this framework to tackle the challenge of unexplained wealth in the country, and then use the resources that are accrued from it to benefit the people, and which Nigeria is a gold standard internationally. And we have seen that happen in our report. If you look into the Mantra report, for example, monitoring recovered assets through transparency and accountability, which civil society have carried out in the country, demonstrate with hard evidence and data that recovered assets can be used to finance development. Again, we must also congratulate EFCC and ICPC for doing fantastic work around asset restitution in the country. And all we need is that we need to firm up the law implementation, and then provide resources for institutions that are also carrying out this action. The processes and the political support also required to make sure that POCA is properly implemented. And the role of the National Assembly is very fundamental. If you look into the law, now, for example, if you look section 71 of the POCA law that talks about the forfeited account, which is supposed to be audited annually, and that audit report, if put in the public, it will help create more political support for the work that EFCC and others are doing. For example, you have seen number of occasions where EFCC has announced recovered asset returned back to the victim. That is very, very useful for the country image, and it's also very useful for the tackling the challenge of illicit financial flow. And that's exactly the reason why I think that this kind of public awareness about the value of Proceeds of Crime Act is very useful. And within that context, we must begin to also see the regulatory body's role. And I am happy that the Federal Ministry of Justice has provided regulation on how this goes around. And that brings me again to the central database, which is part of the law. That central database is something that we must encourage all the relevant entities mentioned in the Proceeds of Crime Act to continue to provide data, because this data will help Nigerians to see the evidence that the anti-corruption agency are actually doing well. For example, like what one of those co-panelists have also mentioned. Now, the relevant organization now have the legal power to ensure that final forfeited assets are disposed and resources are made available to the federal government for utilization.
Much, Reverend. You've raised some pertinent questions, and most especially as we discuss implementation and transparency and how people should be aware of what is going on. Let me come back here to the studio. Mr. Akinsola, he has raised the issue of public awareness. So how important is it for public access to information about recovered assets, in maintaining trust of the public? Because some people say they get the money and it is looted again. There's this accusation back and forth and denial from ICPC, EFCC all the time. So how important is it for public access to information on looted funds being returned to the country?
Thank you very much. It is very, very important for the public to be involved in the management, disposal, and the records or data that are available within the asset recovery of the POCA that provides. Now, it is not, the way it is with public servant that information has to be passed through a particular threshold. When we do our job, the law enforcement agencies, all of us, we have a reporting template. For example, in my commission, every month we submit to the chairman of the commission all the recoveries that are made in different formats. Where we have the, for example, the houses, the lands, the businesses, and then my directorate, we advise on the next step. Now, like I mentioned earlier, for us in law enforcement, the default beneficiary of the proceeds of crime is the federal government. And so we have the law that has already made it, streamline the process for us to provide the recovered asset into an account that is opened at the Central Bank of Nigeria. So the only person that can spend out of that account, of course, is the president and the National Assembly. And like Reverend Ogolo said, there has been news as to what this money has been meant for, has been used for, because it has to pass through the budget processes. So the people who are represented at the National Assembly, they know the source of the funding, they know where the money is being tailored towards. For us also within the commission, whenever we for our management and disposal, we have registered auctioneers, we have property managers, we have valuers, we have a register for all those people to participate in our management system. Of course, from the Ministry of Works, we have valuers that are seconded that help us to get the value at the primary level. But whenever we want to move into the disposal, we have the asset disposal guidelines. That was the policy of the Commission passed pursuant to the passage of the Proceeds of Crime Act. The ADG now created the Asset Disposal Committee. Part of the and parcel of that committee are about 4 key bodies. Number one is Nigerian Union of Journalists, Nigerian Labour Congress, Civil Society Organization, and the Bureau of Public Procurement. They are part of the committee. They have come to join us to come and also help in the transparent and to put a little bit of sense of integrity into their own process, because we showcase and say this is what we have, this is the process we are making. The asset disposal guideline is meant to also streamline our processes so that whenever we are going towards the disposal exercise, it's already showed the step-by-step format that the Commission needs to go. It's a guideline for us. And so, of course, anybody that needs, any public person that requires information is also granted the information.
What I mean is there a website where Nigerians can just go and monitor how this is done? Just click on it and then you get all the information you have. You don't need to go through the bottlenecks.
All right, for the Commission,
yes,
we have our ICPC website. And currently, we're even going through another phase of disposal. And it has already been publicized. That was 2 days ago, or yesterday or 2 days ago, that we are going to a disposal process. So everybody can see what the activities of the Commission is. Like Reverend Ogolo said, we're also working with other interagency groups, particularly the Ministry of Justice, to have what is called the automated asset recovery template, so that any recovery that is made from the ICPC will be front-loaded onto the template. So people from the back end can see all the recoveries that was made by the country, Nigeria, for every given point in time, either by month or quarterly or by the year. But it's something that was launched sometimes in May. So it's still within the work process. It's the working process. It has not been finalized, but it has been tested, and we're working towards doing that.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me get to Tanimu. Now, money trail investigations usually involve financial institutions. From your experience, I mean, a lawyer, former banker, do banks really cooperate in tracing, and helping law enforcement freezing illicit accounts when it matters?
The answer is an absolute no. They are the greatest colluders and collaborators. When I say bank, I mean all the banks, all of them. I will get back to this. I want to just reiterate the point that Hajia made concerning the need to have a kind of a website whereby we can just click and we get all the information that we need. What the agencies that are responsible, what we expect from them, because it's not only ICPC, we have the police, we have the customs, we have the NDLA, we have so many organizations that in one way or the other, this act is, the enforceability of this act is tied to them. We want a situation where we have synergy of all these sisters agencies, and it can be reduced into a single website that will form like a dashboard, whereby from your phone, a single click, you want to know how much has been recovered by the EFCC. Once you click on that website, it will take you to under the EFCC link, or when you click on an asset that has been listed, it will tell you that this property in area 11 was forfeited at the instance of the EFCC. This is what has happened to it. The proceeds of crime is in the central bank. The money has been judiciously used. I think they're not really interested in doing that, but we encourage them, since it's a phased approach. And it's a simple thing. They just need to have intergovernment meeting where you have maybe poker committee encompassing every stakeholders, even private sector, the NBA, the law, private individuals, the NUJ members should now be part of the driving, because this law, no matter how beautiful it is, when the implementation is poor, we'll just be wasting our time and our resources. Then now I want to go back to the banks. As I said, all the banks, when I've been back, there's no exceptions. A lot of illicit funds running into trillions of naira are being channeled through the banks. And what usually happens is that the banks now, because of the era of armchair banking that they've adopted, this is the easiest source of funds for banks. Is that badge that the CBN had to make a circular directing all banks that they should transfer such kind of illicit and suspicious funds to the central bank for warehousing. Most of the banks are not doing it, and the consequences is a slap on the wrist. If you can have 200 billion, I have some cases personally. It's not hearsay. I know of it, of illicit funds running into billions of naira, and I will give you a live case so that you get the gravity of what we are dealing with. We have instances where monies running into billions were transferred into a given bank. The matter was escalated. Bank officials were taken before security agencies. They wrote statements. There are evidence. But 2 years down the line, the same bank now is denying that such kind of monies never came into their account. Officers that made those statements, they were dismissed. No, they dismissed. They will force them either to resign or they will actually sack them. And that monies are still within the financial sector of the banking industry. And let me tell you how it works. Because the security agencies, they lack the capacity. What the bank do is that they create a portal for them, and they will think they have access to the back end of they don't. They are not seeing any amount. If your account now, let me tell you, banks, they have the capacity. All your transaction details will disappear. You will never see the 1 million that went in, that came in. They will rearrange it in such a way that if the CBN, I work in a bank and I'm telling you this from practical example. If the CBN comes, they are meeting the IT guys in a particular bank, and the IT guy is giving them data that they should work with, not the real data. You ask yourself, how did so many banks collapse? And today they will declare humongous profit, and the next day they are collapsed. It's because what we call the cook figures, all the data, all the information, they are not true. Once such kind of suspicious illicit money comes in, the banks now, they will say they are investigating it as suspicious. I'm talking of trillions of naira. They will say suspicious funds they are investigating. In fact, sometimes the owners of the monies will come and say, this is my money. And the bank now, because of the benefit of keeping, such banks are in the business of financial intermediation. So if 1 trillion comes into a given bank, and the bank now decides to investigate, that monies will be lying fallow in that bank for maybe 5 years, and in that 5 years they've been doing business on it. And if at the end they are found one thing, what they will simply do at times is to return it back to the source where the money came from. They will even deduct charges for keeping such. This thing happens in
and
most
they've made billions out of the interest.
Out of it. Billions, as I'm talking to you. In fact, if we expect the central bank, if they are really, really serious, they get ex-bankers that have worked, those in compliance units, those in the marketing unit. Some people are ready to do whistleblowing because we've been blowing. I've written, as I said, I've written petitions, and at the end you will discover that they are sending the money back. The Ministry of Justice, there was a time under the former Minister Abuja Malami, they launched the Voluntary Asset Regularization Scheme, whereby some of the the owners, some actually are Nigerians that own those money. We don't know how they got the money. They are trying to bring it back along the line. They gave them opportunity. Okay, come out, come and explain to the extent of what you wanted to do with the monies and how you got the money. And if they've done the necessary profile, background check, and they discover that it is not as illicit, maybe it's no financing terrorism, and maybe some 1 or 2 documentation, and if they try to regularize, and in the whole process, Nigeria will benefit from it. But I don't think if that that scheme is actually working anymore, because the banks are frustrating it. The banks, yes, are frustrating
indeed, the
it.
banks are frustrating it, and
there are no check and balances. The regime of control.
There's still so much work,
to
be done, because for this act to pass, it went, it took a long time for the act itself to pass. Let's bring in Reverend Ogolo into this conversation now. Now that we have a unified framework for managing recovered assets, my question to you is: who oversees the management or disposal of recovered proceeds, and how is accountability guaranteed in this case?
Thank you very much. I think part of the law provision is that each of the relevant organizations, which include ESCI, ICPC, they have a directorate of proceeds of crime and management. For example, in ESCC, they have that unit and which deals with the issue of asset management. And just to also deal with the issue of transparency, which my friend in EFCC have mentioned earlier on, there are instances when they want to dispose of these assets. They have invited. I have participated as civil society representative in ICPC. I have participated as civil society representative in EFCC. And so, even NDLA have also invited me to participate in their disposal of their asset. And what they are trying to do by that is to make sure that citizens are aware of what they are doing with asset confiscated and the disposal process. That creates confidence, that builds trust, because you need trust to sustain the whole process, even in the global conversations around asset management and forfeiture, like the Global Forum on Asset Recovery Principles. In 2017, 4 countries and US and UK government, including World Bank and UNODC, came together, and I led 10 civil society to participate in that conference in Washington, where this principle of disposal of assets were discussed extensively, and the whole idea of creating trust and ensuring that the asset is used judicially for the benefit of victim was essentially agreed upon, and today is becoming a reference point as a principle. And in all the MOU that the Nigerian government signed with countries that are returning money to Nigeria, that principle of transparency and accountability and management of recovered assets is always included in the MOU. And in terms of looking into the law empowers all the relevant agencies to set up that particular department, and EFCC have done that, ICPC have done that, and other organizations. And one of the things we are trying to do now in a new project we have also started a few months ago with the support of the UK government is to strengthen the capacity. And we have carried out now what we call the technical needs assessment for all the relevant organizations in the Proceeds of Crime Act. We have carried out this assessment with ICPC, we have done that with NDLA, we have done that with NAPTIP, we have done that with Ministry of Justice, and that of ESC is coming up. And hopefully after this technical needs assessment, some of these opportunity to strengthen and share experiences. For instance, the capacity that ICPC have, NAPTIP might not have it. The capacity that ESCC have, NDLA might not have it. So if they share that experience, you will find out that it will help increase interagency cooperation. Because what is essential about this whole poker is that the poker provides the domestic legal framework for Nigeria to comply to these global treaties like the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and then compliance of a framework like Financial Action Task Force, FATF. You know, Nigeria appears on the green list, and that has made it impossible for Nigeria to increase their global investment drive. I'm happy now that Nigeria is gradually coming out of that process, and it is the work of ESCC, ICPC, NFIU that are helping Nigeria to move away from this blacklisted space, and that will increase the potential for banks to be able to have correspondent bank to do their operation globally, and that will increase the opportunity to grow the economy. And when you grow the economy, that deals with the challenge of unemployment, that deals with the challenge of creating more job opportunity in the country, and the rate of Nigeria moving out of the country as a result of looking for group pasture will reduce. And even Nigeria will become a center to attract talent to grow the economy. And that's exactly this whole what POCAL is all about. So POCAL is a framework that empowers this relevant agency to carry out this disposal. So what is our role as civil society? That's exactly what we are currently doing in Bayelsa. Why this money is restricted back, currently sitting in the Central Bank of Nigeria, this money, for it to be used judiciously for what was agreed in the MOU between Nigerian government and the US government, we are building the capacity of civil society in Bayelsa. Last 2-3 weeks, we brought over 25 civil society in Bayelsa. For 3 days, we were training them on how to keep an eye on how this money will be used eventually. And I'm happy that the Nigerian government and Bayelsa government are currently collaborating in a competitive bid process to select an independent NGO that will implement the project in Bayelsa. And so that again brings to the fore the value that civil society are providing into this entire process. And I must congratulate EFCC, ICPC, and all the anti-corruption agency, including the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, for providing that enabling environment for civil society to engage in this technical area. Because the political economy of asset recovery is that no government alone can do it alone. And for my over 30 years working on asset recovery globally, I've seen that government who close the door against civil society, they don't get very successful, particularly drawing lessons from the Arab Spring. After the whole crisis in Arab country, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, they tried to get their fund back. They have not been very successful like Nigeria. So we are very lucky. And in building on this success story, which we, for example, in civil society, are very willing to continue to sustain. I remember when the former government set up the Interministerial Committee on Asset Recovery. I was a member of that Interministerial Committee and trying to see how assets recovered to be disposed until the court ruled that disbanded that committee. One of the key things is that Nigeria assets seized as a result of crime are lying waste across the country. So the need to have a regime that will enable all these relevant organizations to carry out proper disposal that is transparent, accountable, that will not make resources available for Nigeria to finance sustainable development, legacy projects like the Ibadan Express, the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, the Abuja-Kanu Road, and the Niger Bridge. We want to escalate that kind of investment. You can imagine over $1 million that was recovered from Alamesia in the US is now going to finance, and that's over ₦1 billion that will not.
All right, thank you very much. We get your point. Over $1 million recovered from the US has multiplied over time. We thank you very much, Reverend David Ugola. And just a gentle reminder that we expect your messages, WhatsApp messages, using the contact on your screen. Make it short. Let's have your name, where you are writing in from, and your thoughts or questions so that we can attend to them. Let me get back to Olakunle. A lot has been said about transparency. Can you walk us through a recent case where, you know, the act has been successfully invoked, say from confiscation to management of the assets? An example.
All right. Well, we have a couple, but I think I will just give one. There was a property at, I think it's in Abuja here, Durumi specifically. It's about 5 duplexes, terraces. And so when we secured the interim forfeiture order, that's the first leg of it, and we discovered that there was a lot of time taken in court. So the commission decided to put the asset in use. We found that at the time we got in, the asset is already dilapidating. You see, of course, once the building is not being used, the roof start coming down, the painting on the wall, everything around the house. Yeah. And there's a generator, a big generator that services the whole apartment. It was already being stolen in parts. In Abuja, that kind of a building, we have its own transformer. The transformer was gone. So the commission had to look into, once we have an asset in your hand, the first thing is for everybody to sit down at the round table and determine the best form of management, because each asset has its own different things that you need to look into, the viability and all. So eventually we decided to put the asset in use. And because there was no line charge, we call it, I think, accounting, from government for us to pay or get funds for money, all we have is our operational funds. It was a bit of a challenge. So we had to look through and we got a property manager that was registered. I said earlier that we have this register. So we, through a competitive process, we tried to pick out one. And then we got the manager to go into the market, source for funds in terms of from tenants. And then we had to rent the property as is out. Okay. So that people could look at it. Okay, so if it's, we needed to maybe bring down the value in the first year to be able to let people in so that they can bring their own excess funds from the rent to put the house in use. And there are pictures. If you see the way the property was and the way it is now, it is in sharp contrast. From that asset alone, the commission generated about 40 million naira on rent. On rent alone. And that's part of our success story in the commission. So when we are doing stuff like that, we have to get in the CSOs, the property manager, the auctioneers, so that they also help us, because we are operatives. Yeah. I was employed as a lawyer, so I was a prosecutor. My main business is to send people to jail and then get my scoring mark. But then when the asset recovery regime started in the commission at about 2011, 2012, professionals were sent to the department, and I was one of them, to look into the back end to see and understand what the whole of asset recovery is. And that got us onto where we have the POCA in 2022 that now streamlined to help the management and disposal of forfeited assets.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you so much. The conversation is beginning to wind down, and it's becoming very, very interesting. And Nigerians are beginning to send in their contributions to the on the topic. But we'll get to that right after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We have some questions that came in from our viewers. I'll take one from, do you have some, Victor?
I do.
Okay, I'll take the one from Musa Bashir Usman in Abuja here. He said, this crime rate coming in our financial institutions are being tackled to the barest minimum, thanks to our financial institutions and advancement in technology, which is greatly improving the level of securities in our financial management system. Generally, government must sustain system integration and standards in their daily operations. Victor.
All right. This one is from Michael Uchobi. Good morning, honorable panelists, he says. Just to ask if most of these recovered funds have an area in the Nigerian economy where it is channeled, or is it re-looted again? My simple suggestion is to use these monies in the rehabilitation of our roads in Nigeria, since they are very bad. Okay, I think you probably joined a bit later, but this one is from Abdurazak Abdul Kadri in Lokoja, Kogi State. Said, good morning, NTA and the guests. Thank you for the wonderful job you guys are doing. Please, I want to disagree with the anti-graft man from ICPC, who said Nigeria needs all the money available in the world for development. No. If we have been disciplined as a nation and as people, The funds we have earned in the past and still earning with the resources at our disposal are more than enough to compete with any country in the world. We must tackle pandemic called corruption in our national psyche. Thanks to NTA for the public enlightenment. And I wish other media houses will compulsorily be made to dedicate more of their time to engage on anti-corruption campaigns. It is worse than COVID and Ebola joined together. All right. You may want to respond to some of the issues because at least this one was directed
to you.
Well, just to say that it wasn't from me that that statement was made. It was Reverend Ogolo that made that statement. So it's not the statement from the ICPC. However, it is true that we need the funds. That's the truth. The money that has been stolen has to come back. You see, when we have an idea of how much that has been stolen from this country, and the IFF, like Reverend Ogolo made mention, the Thabo Mbeki panel, it says that $50 billion in dollars. In fact, the word they use is it leaves the continent of Africa annually, and Nigeria is responsible for over 60% of those funds. And that was in 2015. The Thabo Mbeki panel was between 2011 and 2015. The report came back in 2015. As at 2020-2021, I think it's a year, they came up with a staggering remarks about assets, or the value of assets that has been stolen outside this country. So no doubt, Nigeria needs all these funds back. It is what we worked for. In fact, the OECD, they said that if Africa gets the money that has been stolen, if you can plug the loopholes, the money that is stolen out of Africa is much more than what we receive in AIDS. Meaning that all these loans that we go to take from IMF to do infrastructure, if we plug in the holes, where all this money, and it's not only in corruption. In fact, if you look at the whole concept of IFF, corruption is just a small fragment of it. That's why the FRS is anchoring the illicit financial flow as we speak. Because many of them, of those money, goes out in aggressive tax avoidance. So there's no doubt that Nigeria needs all this money that we need to be able to do our infrastructures. Thank you.
Okay, but corruption itself, it's sort of the big elephant in the room is the foundation of all this illicit stolen wealth. So it cannot just be a small fraction, do you think?
I'm not saying corruption is a small fraction.
Okay.
But if you look at the whole amount that are stolen or taken, or in the words of the other, they say it leaves the African continent. Because everything is put in a format. And then you see crime. Corruption is not just the aspect of the crime that goes out. It talks about unlawful activities, it talks about corruption, and, for example, stolen artifacts. Because everything is part of, you look at the mining sector, the money that is illicitly taken away. I mean, the news is there, is out there. So it's by the time you look at all the money that has been put in the database to say, this is how much that has been stolen out of Nigeria, then you know that the value of corruption takes about 33% of all those funds.
All those funds. Okay, right. Thank you. Tanimu, you know, we have to learn from other climes for, laws like this to succeed in Nigeria. And countries like the UK, the USA, Singapore, South Africa have recorded remarkable success with similar laws, actually. So what lessons can Nigeria draw from them?
A lot, a whole lot. You see, there's no... we don't need to start recreating the book. It has already been done. What we need to do is just to replicate. We can get experts, implementers of those laws in those climes, get them so that they train and they share ideas and experiences. You see, what I note is that we've never lacked enough laws to cope all the challenges that have been bedeviling the country. It's the implementation, the sincerity of purpose. My learned brother here can have all the ideas he wants to implement. If those immediately on his top in the office said no, wait till your turn, there's nothing really he can do. It's everywhere in the civil service, even in the private sector. We've seen MDs telling those in the legal department, in the compliance unit, wait for your turn, or if you keep asking on this file, you'll be out. We've written, I'm telling you this as with me, I've written to the CBN, to various governments. I want this under freedom of information. If you go to the court, there are a lot of cases at the High Court, at the Federal High Court, on government agencies to comply to Freedom of Information Act. They have refused to. So you see that before the Emefiele instances, a lot of people have been writing on those issues now that are now in public domain. We all know this, and you see what we always clamor for is that we should reduce the level of transactional approach to investigation, to performing government activities, whereby I will be confident enough to approach the ICPC, the EFCC, to know that I don't even need to bedevil myself in writing series of petition, reminder, to the extent of even compelling them by going to court, seeking for an order to compel them to do what they are supposed to do. Is appalling.
That's part of why, in the public eye, there appears to be distrust.
Sure, absolutely.
As per what happens to recovered funds after they have been recovered. So, has this law now done enough? Does this have enough mechanisms to reassure Nigerians?
The law has always, let me tell you, as I said, before now there have been gamut of various laws. Law has never been the problem. It's the implementation, the drivers. Even without laws, even with the Establishment Act of the various agencies, NDLEA, they have enough provisions in the law. What this law simply do is just to make the processes to be seamless, to be expeditious, to go with least challenge, whereby lawyers will not use technicalities and all not to frustrate the process. But if you remember, the laws are already there. The challenges has been with the implementation, and most of which is not as a result of inadequacy in the law. It's about the drivers. If you have, we've seen anti-graft operators at the highest level being investigated and charged to being investigated for the same corruption that they are supposed to. So you know that we need a lot of reorientation, a lot of patriotism, whereby you see that the amount of monies going out, income leakages, wastages in every sector. Is it the oil and gas sector? Is it the mining? Is it even basic contracting? Billions, trillions have been taken. You'll be shocked that if, for example, you have access to some account, you see individuals, and you see the billions, and you will not be wondering, are you in the same country? You'll be struggling to say you need 100 million to have a house, to live a simple life. You have people below 35 having 100 billion, 500. What have they done? Or what are nobody? We need to start asking questions. What is the source of your income?
And
where
then
do we get
law,
those money?
the timeline is another issue that people have pointed to. Why does it take so much time? Corruption cases will take so many years, and then the case becomes fizzles out.
The fight is still about implementation. It's about the drivers. And when I say drivers, the courts are involved, the lawyers are involved. If I'm as a lawyer, and today the NBA is now sanctioning, we have lawyers too that have been investigated too. So we should start we need to press a reset button. We need to have the clean house should start from within. News people collecting brown envelope, the lawyers.
It's okay there. Let's bring you, Reverend Ugolo, into this. Into this. It's getting very interesting, and let's talk about, as we are talking about, the way forward and the challenges. Let's talk about the biggest obstacles to fully implementing this act. Some say it is institutional. Some say it's political and legal. We cannot, take away the fact that there's interagency rivalry, or overlapping mandates that need to be addressed under this new act.
Yes, thank you very much. I think first is to also to throw light on the poker regulation, which has come out from the Federal Ministry of Justice as the regulatory authority. Is for more awareness on that regulatory initiative, which I think is ongoing. The last time we were also aware that the Federal Ministry of Justice conducted training for some key officers from the relevant organizations on how they will upload data into the central database. That again pushes towards the issue of transparency and accountability. Because one thing that to raise legitimacy and trust around the implementation of this law is about awareness, outreach, public awareness. Government need to make information available to the public. If you look what one of those citizens sent in a while ago, it's also part of gap in awareness. And so that awareness need to be there. Another area in the law that will previously require kind of reform is the auditing. The Accountant General, by the provision of the poker law, is mandated to carry out annual audit of that account. And the law stopped at that. So it doesn't really help the public. So such reports need to be put in public domain. And if the provision of the law also empower the National Assembly to have a kind of a public hearing, and I'm happy that one of the members of the National Assembly have also raised questions around possible reform in that direction. And so something that will, public need to know the effort that this relevant organization, because if you look what EFCC and ICP is doing around cyber crime, organized crime, illicit financial flow, you will agree with me that the lessons we had from our friend from EFCC a while ago about how to have a line of budget that will empower ICPC to sustain and maintain. I have had the opportunity to, as a member of the Interministerial Committee on Asset Disposal in this country, to go to some of these assets, even in seized ships in the sea with products. They would just be there wasting. And unfortunately, the relevant organization don't have the resources. They don't have what it takes to maintain and sustain and keeping those assets. And so to continue to do that, you need public awareness. And then what the Auditor General is doing in auditing those accounts, the report should not just be kept in the shelf. We should find a way where the National Assembly, they should be aware of it, and in that process, the Nigerian public will be aware of it. And if we begin to see what those resources are used in the country, it will begin to send the right message. Then in terms of interagency cooperation, when you look at the regulations also is also part of the tools to make that happen. And I'm happy that under the current leadership of the Attorney General, that's one area that came out very strongly in the Asset Recovery Summit that was organized in May. And that summit came out with the concrete recommendations. And I hope, and that's part of the things that we want to be working with the Federal Ministry of Justice in this our project we're doing with the support of FCDO to ensure that this relevant organization who have also taking part in the technical needs assessment will be tackling some of those challenges to ensure that capacity building, training, awareness, and then political will from the presidency is also very required. If EFCC is to gain the support of international jurisdiction, you will agree with me that the political support from the presidency is very important. Without the political will, there's nothing the anti-corruption agency can do. Take, for example, you are dealing with a politically exposed person that is very powerful in the ruling party. EFCC will be constrained, or ICPC will be constrained in carrying out investigation. And two, there's also some technical challenges in foreign jurisdiction. I give an example. When Nigerian government was about to embark on asset restitution from France, just in the mutual legal assistance, the letter that the Nigerian government need to put before France needed to be put in the French language. And, that technicality alone caused almost a delay to ensure that restitution happened. So,
thank you. Thank you very much, Reverend Ugolo. Thank you. Now, back here in the studio, a lot has been said again about transparency. How is the commission working? to ensure transparency and public confidence in the use of recovered assets?
All right, I've said it earlier. First of all, immediately after the passage of POCA, the Commission designed the asset disposal guidelines. The asset disposal guideline is also to ensure integrity and transparency even within the Commission, within the system, so that it tells you the step-by-step process to take whenever there's needs for the Commission to dispose assets. And then the Commission, as a staff, as the members of the ADC, we are precluded from even having any interest in the assets to be disposed. And then we signed an agreement so that to ensure that there's nobody that's a part of the body, part of the ADC that is a member or that's going to purchase the property. Thereafter, we get the public involved in this our processes so that they know. And for the disposal, we have the Nigerian Labour Congress, the Nigerian Union of Journalists, and the BPP to also help us, particularly the CSOs. And the last one that we had one this week, a meeting like that this week, we have two CSOs, civil society organizations, that joined. What we are trying to do is to come and showcase ourselves, to come and say, look, this is what we have in
trying to
in
build
place.
transparency.
Yes, and public trust.
But in spite of these guardrails, you still have erring staff. You still have staff that are found wanting. I'm sure you won't deny that. How does the Commission usually deal with, because the ICPC is part of Nigeria, really. You have the good, the bad, the ugly, and so you don't expect one agency to be completely above board. So how does the Commission deal with staff that are found wanting? Because that's where the difference lies.
All right. First and foremost, we're public servants. And so we're also guided by the public service rules. We also have the condition of service that is working, operational within the system. So if there is an errant staff that is found culpable in any form or manner, the disciplinary process is automatically kick-started. And that person, of course, with the rules of the Constitution, is also have the right to be heard, and all those rights that are there, the fundamental rights in the Constitution. So the person will have the opportunity to also come and defend himself if he wishes before a disciplinary committee. And after that hearing, a decision will be made one way or the other. And we've had instances within the Commission that a staff has been punished for violating the extant rules and laws. So we are not so immune from the larger society that we are, but then we have an internal process by which we, punish errant officers.
Okay. Tanimu, what next steps do you think would you recommend for Nigeria, to achieve a transparent, accountable, and internationally credible asset recovery system? In just 1 minute.
For a start, I want to take a different approach from my learned brother. They are individuals, they are staff, they are Nigerians. They should be entitled to those recovered assets. As you are working, you should be able to benefit. The challenge ever since has always been transparency. Let me give you an example. There's a car that has been confiscated. There shouldn't be any law precluding an official of those agencies from purchasing if he has
conflict of interest.
Yes, there's the conflict of interest issue. The conflict of interest issue will only come up when there's an abuse. If a car is going for, maybe you peg it down. It's a very simple thing. I'm equally trained as an auctioneer too, so I know these things. If a car is going for ₦1 million, the government can now set it. This is the base limit line that we have set for this car to say a reasonable man. The for sale value of this 406 is ₦1 million. Then you can, if you want to be transparent, you can just say online, real time, the highest bidder within a given time, maybe 2 hours. You've pegged it down, maybe based on valuation report that the for sale value of this car is ₦1 million. It's on public domain, real time. Anybody can just log on. Okay, 1 million, I'm buying it for 1.5. I'm buying it for, and they make it that, okay, the moment the process is concluded, you should make payment within maybe 30 minutes. If you fail, the next person in line down to the person that makes payment. That will give room for everybody to have equal participation. You know that you are working. What I'm saying is that recently, or a couple of times ago, EFCC sold some assets, and a client approached me to equally write petition that one of those assets find its way back to somebody in the, and we wrote a petition, and the petition was completely ignored. So those kind of challenges, we don't need to think that they are not Nigerians. They are a product of the same society.
Is that not why the ICPC has taken the approach to exclude?
No. When you exclude,
so that you are not tempted.
They were excluded, but they use the proceeds.
back
So
door,
now, let's accept the reality that we are Nigerians. Corruption is in our system, but we can do away with it. By the time we accept the fact that we are all Nigerians, we are going to make deliberate laws, policies to block these loopholes, leakages, incomes, and the rest. And how do you do it? I've given you a practical solution. Allow them to be involved. Okay. If you are working and your salary can make you to purchase a 406, and I'm outside, I'm doing my private practice, and I want to purchase the same 406, it's very simple. Make it a public thing. The minimum baseline is 1 million. You can subscribe. I can subscribe. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million.
That will curb corruption within the system itself.
All right. Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu, human rights lawyer and former banker, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for
and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Let me also thank Reverend David Ugolo, who is Executive Director, African Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. He joined us from our Benin studio. We thank you very much for your time on the program.
Very much.
Olakule Akeshola is a lawyer and Assistant Director at the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Department of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. Thank you very much for shedding light on quite a number of issues. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We thank you very much for joining us. We hope you do the same tomorrow. I am Victor Azu. Bye-bye for now.
And I am Jumwe Yusuf. Do have a great day ahead.